always want to thank my mother for giving this idea to my brother and I. But this hasn't helped me in school. I mean, I still meandered through middle school and high school, not being able to pay attention. If I was in school today, I'd be a kid with, ADD or ADHD. But I graduated the bottom half of my high school class. And I went to college because that's what was expected of me to go to college, so I did. But I actually went to the wrong school. Now, I don't mean I went to this college over here thinking that maybe this one was a better fit. I actually couldn't have paid enough attention to apply. So I applied and showed up at a school, this school, thinking I was going to this one over here. I'm quite possibly the only person that has ever done this. I'd actually gone to the wrong college, thinking I was going somewhere else. And I show up, and after a few weeks, I'm like, hey, when's the football game? I'm like, we don't have a football team. That's that other school in Maryland. And I'm basically going through the same motions I went through in high school. I couldn't pay attention, I didn't know how to study, wasn't doing well at all. Eventually, I'm not even going to class. And one day, I just happened to walk across the college campus, and I just go into the bookstore to buy gum or something, not a book. I don't think I had ever bought a book before in my life at this point. But I see this book on the shelf. It's got this red, white, and blue cover. And it's got this title that just shows motion in a very, very positive direction, and it made me get it up. I started looking through the pages of this book. I was interested enough that I purchased it, took it back to my dorm room, and laid there on my bed, my own unmade dorm room bed, for the next few days, and read this book from cover to cover. The book was The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe. And in The Right Stuff, there were these stories of the fighter pilots that became the test pilots, that became the original Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo astronauts. And I recognized, the way Tom Wolfe wrote this, I recognized traits that these guys had in themselves, these real people, that I felt like I had myself, despite being this kid that could never do his homework or pay attention. And this book was my spark that got me to change my life. And I decided right then and there that I was going to try to be like these guys. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do it, but I was going to handle it kind of like my mother did, getting over that wall. And I know what you're thinking, 18-year-old kid decides that he's going to become an astronaut. Well, that's a giant leap. But really what it was a bunch of very, very small, manageable steps. Kind of like how my mother approached being a police officer. So I did one of the hardest things I ever have to do in my entire life. I was teach myself how to pay attention, eventually how to study. I started doing better in school. I changed colleges, I changed majors. I got into a commissioning program in the United States Navy. Eventually graduated from college, was commissioned an ensign in the Navy, and I go down to Pensacola, Florida to learn how to fly airplanes. And when I get down there, I realize I am not a particularly good pilot. I'd never flown an airplane before. I know that's hard to believe. Astronaut saying he wasn't a good pilot, but I'll admit it, I wasn't very good. But I did well enough that, I was able to get assigned to fly jet airplanes, and eventually I got my wings as a Navy pilot. I got assigned to learn how to fly the F-14 Tomcat, which, as you know, is, some of you might